The day they bulldozed my great-grandfather's bridge was the day I decided to turn their $4 million lakefront resort into a muddy parking lot. It's 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'm sipping coffee on my dock when I hear diesel engines. Through the morning mist, I see a bulldozer rolling toward the stone bridge my great-grandfather built with his own hands in 1923. The same bridge that connected our community for 100 years. The bridge some power-hungry HOA president decided was an eyesore. Here's what Linda Prescott and her fancy HOA board didn't know about water rights in Texas. My great-grandfather didn't just build that bridge, he controlled the dam. And I just inherited something more powerful than any HOA bylaw, the legal right to drain their entire lake. My name's Jake Morrison. I'm a civil engineer, and 3 months ago, I inherited the most beautiful piece of lakefront property you've ever seen. My great-grandfather Samuel Morrison built our family cabin back in 1920 after he got back from the Great War. But the real masterpiece was the bridge. Sam didn't just slap together some planks. This man hand-cut limestone blocks from the local quarry and built a proper stone arch bridge that connected our side of the lake to the main road. For 100 years that bridge served everyone. Fishermen heading to favorite spots, kids walking to swimming holes, neighbors helping neighbors. When I inherited the place, my wife Sarah and I had dreams. We'd been saving every penny, planning to retire there. I'd fix up the cabin, maybe do some consulting work from home, spend my mornings fishing. Then Linda Prescott happened. Linda's the kind of woman who wears pearls to the grocery store and drives a spotless white BMW that's never seen a dirt road. She moved into the Whispering Pines luxury community 2 years ago, the fancy development that sprouted up on the other side of the lake. Within 6 months, she'd maneuvered herself into the HOA presidency. I should have seen trouble coming when I got that first certified letter. Inside was Linda's letterhead declaring that my bridge violated community architectural standards and had to go. I laughed out loud. My bridge was built when her development was still cow pasture. But Linda had done her homework. The letter cited HOA Covenant number 47B and threatened me with $500 a day in fines if I didn't remove the bridge within 30 days. That's when I started digging through boxes in my grandfather's attic. I found the original survey maps, the deed records, and most importantly, the grandfathering clause that specifically protected existing structures. My bridge was literally older than the HOA by 8 decades. Armed with paperwork, I showed up to the next HOA meeting. I spread my documents across the folding table like I was playing a winning poker hand. Gentlemen, ladies, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Linda barely glanced at my papers. Times change, Mr. Morrison. Progress requires sacrifice. She said it with this condescending smile, like she was explaining basic math to a child. The board vote was a foregone conclusion. 5-2 in favor of enforcement. Linda's allies, all recent arrivals with more money than sense, outnumbered the old-timers. Walking back to my truck after that meeting, I realized something important. This wasn't about architectural standards. This was about power. Linda saw my humble bridge, my working-class cabin, my beat-up pickup truck, and decided I didn't fit her vision of an upscale neighborhood. Sarah tried to stay optimistic. "We'll fight this together," she said over dinner. "You've got the law on your side." What I didn't know yet was that Linda had picked a fight with the wrong engineer. See, I didn't just know about building codes and property law. I knew about water. Linda didn't waste time moving from threats to action. 3 days after that board meeting, I'm heading out when I spot 2 guys in matching polo shirts near my property line. Security guards at 7 in the morning. "Morning, gentlemen," I called out. "Y'all lost." The older one pulled out a clipboard. "HOA Compliance Patrol, sir. We're documenting violations." Over the next 2 weeks, these clowns wrote me up for everything short of breathing too loud. My mailbox was apparently the wrong shade of black. My welcome mat was non-compliant sizing. They even cited me for having a fishing net visible from the road. By week 3, I was staring at $1,200 in fines. That's when I did what any good engineer does. I investigated the system. Turns out Linda's husband Rick owns Prescott Security Solutions. The HOA was paying her husband's company $3,000 a month to harass homeowners. I spent an evening on the state contractor licensing website and discovered something interesting. Rick's security license had expired 6 months ago. He'd been operating illegally. But I wasn't done digging. I called in a favor from a buddy who does commercial inspections. We took a walk around Linda's pristine property. Her deck extension? No permits. Her pool house? Built 6 inches over the setback line. That fancy Japanese garden she was so proud of? According to the original survey, it was 3 feet onto my property. Linda had been trespassing for 3 years. The next Monday, I filed complaints with the state licensing board about Rick's security company and requested a full survey of the property line. I didn't make a big show of it, just handled it like any other engineering problem. Linda's response was predictable. Within a week, I started hearing whispers at the hardware store. Jake Morrison's been difficult to work with. He's lowering property values. Sarah came home from the grocery store looking frustrated. The cashier barely made eye contact, and Mrs. Patterson acted like I had the plague. That's when anonymous complaints started rolling in. Someone called the county claiming my bridge was structurally unsafe. Another tipster reported I was dumping chemicals in the lake. Hilarious since I'm an environmental engineer who tests water quality for a living. But here's where Linda made her first real mistake. While she was busy playing neighborhood politician, I was doing what I do best: reading technical documents. I'd submitted a public records request for anything related to water rights and dam operations around our lake. What I found in those musty county files made me sit up straight. There were maps I'd never seen before showing water flow patterns from the 1920s, engineering reports from my great-grandfather's era, and most interesting of all, documentation of something called secondary water rights that had never been transferred to the HOA. I spent that weekend walking around the lake with a surveyor's eye, really looking at how the water moved. The resort that Linda kept bragging about had a serious vulnerability. Their entire operation depended on consistent water levels. Their boat docks, their lakefront dining, their million-dollar water features. All of it assumed the lake would stay exactly where it was. Linda was so focused on my little stone bridge that she'd never bothered to understand the bigger picture. Linda thought she was playing chess, but she didn't realize I wasn't just another homeowner. I was the guy who understood how the water worked. Linda's next move came with the subtlety of a freight train. I'm in my home office when I hear trucks outside. 3 county vehicles and a man in a hard hat carrying a clipboard. Jake Morrison? The inspector looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Anonymous tip about structural concerns with your bridge. I'm here to conduct a safety evaluation. Anonymous tip. Right. I could practically smell Linda's expensive perfume. The inspection took 4 hours. When he finished, he looked embarrassed. Mr. Morrison, your bridge is solid as the day it was built. But he consulted his clipboard. Current code requires seismic reinforcement. Estimated cost for compliance is $3,000. You've got 10 days. $3,000 for earthquake protection in Texas, where the biggest seismic event was when they blasted rock for the new highway. The inspector handed me a business card. Prescott Construction can handle the work. Rick Prescott gave me a quote for $12,000. I stared at that business card like it was a snake. Rick Prescott, Linda's husband, volunteering to fix the problem his wife had created for $12,000. That evening I made phone calls. Started with the state contractor licensing board. Sir, Mr. Prescott's contractor license expired 24 months ago. He's not legally authorized to perform construction work. Next call was to my buddy at the county building department. Jake, that seismic requirement only applies to new construction. Existing structures are grandfathered unless they're actually unsafe. Armed with this information, I decided to dig deeper into those water rights documents. What I found made my hands shake. My great-grandfather hadn't just built a bridge and a cabin. He'd held secondary water rights to the entire lake system granted back when this was still ranch country. Those rights included something called flow management authority. In plain English, I could legally control how much water stayed in the lake. I spent the next 2 days studying engineering reports from the 1920s dam construction. The original designers built bypass channels that could redirect water around the main dam. My great-grandfather's bridge wasn't just transportation. It was positioned to control a secondary spillway system. Meanwhile, Linda was busy playing her reputation game. She'd convinced 3 of my neighbors that I was unstable and potentially dangerous. I came home one evening to find new security cameras pointed directly at my property from 2 different houses. The breaking point came when Linda filed for a restraining order. Claimed I'd made threatening statements about the dam. The judge tossed it out, but the damage was done. Half the neighborhood now thought I was some kind of unhinged domestic terrorist. That's when I made a discovery that changed everything. I was reviewing the resort's environmental impact study when I noticed something in the fine print. Their bank loan had very specific requirements about water levels. If the lake dropped below a certain depth, their entire $4 million loan would become immediately due. The resort's grand opening was 3 months away. Deposits had been collected for weddings, corporate retreats, fishing tournaments. Linda's family had invested $500,000 of their own money. I sat in my kitchen that night staring at those loan documents and realized something profound. Linda thought she was fighting about HOA rules. But she'd picked a fight with someone who understood the one thing her entire development depended on. Water doesn't care about HOA bylaws. It flows according to physics and legal precedent. And I was beginning to understand that I held more power than any HOA president ever could. Linda's patience finally snapped the week before Thanksgiving. I'm checking my mailbox when I see her marching across the street clutching another manila envelope. Mr. Morrison, her voice could have cut glass. I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting. Your bridge represents an immediate safety crisis. She thrust the envelope at me. Inside was a notice for a crisis intervention meeting scheduled for the next evening. The agenda was simple: vote to authorize immediate bridge removal with or without my consent. The meeting was a circus. Linda had imported some guy claiming to be a structural engineer who'd never actually seen my bridge but was happy to declare it a death trap. The vote was swift and merciless. 7-1 in favor of immediate removal. Contractor will begin tomorrow morning, Linda announced with barely concealed glee. Removal fees of $15,000 will be added to Mr. Morrison's account. $15,000 to destroy something my great-grandfather built with his own hands. That night, I filed an emergency injunction in county court. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. the next morning, exactly when Linda's contractor was supposed to start demolition. Judge Martinez listened for exactly 12 minutes. Emergency injunction granted. 30-day temporary restraining order issued. I called Linda from the courthouse parking lot. Demolitions canceled. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, this is war, Mr. Morrison. That afternoon, I discovered something that made Linda's declaration of war feel almost quaint. I was reviewing HOA financial records when I noticed interesting discrepancies. Over the past year, Linda had authorized $30,000 in legal consultations and emergency contractor services. Every single payment went to companies owned by her husband or her brother-in-law. I spent the weekend playing forensic accountant. Linda hadn't just been using HOA funds to harass me. She'd been treating the community treasury like her personal piggy bank. But the real revelation came when I found the lake's original engineering survey from 1923. My great-grandfather hadn't just built a bridge. He'd positioned it as a control structure for what the old documents called secondary flow management. I spent hours studying those faded blueprints. The more I understood about the original design, the more I realized Linda had made a catastrophic error. She thought she was fighting some working-class guy with a stubborn streak. But my great-grandfather had been the chief engineer on this entire lake system. He'd built redundancy and control into every structure, including his bridge. That Sunday evening I called my old professor from Texas A&M, a guy who specialized in historical water rights law. After I explained the situation, he was quiet for a long moment. Jake, if what you're telling me is accurate, you don't just own a bridge. You own water management authority for that entire lake system. That's not an HOA matter anymore. That's federal water rights law. I walked out to my dock. The taste of November air was sharp and clean. For the first time in months I smiled. Linda had declared war, but she had no idea what weapons I was about to bring to the fight. The lake dropped exactly 18.5 inches over the next 6 hours. By sunset, the resort's million-dollar boat docks were sitting in mud, and their grand opening weekend was officially canceled. The bank called their loan that same evening. But here's the thing about water: it's patient and it's fair. Within 24 hours, I'd restored normal flow to the lake. The investors, suddenly very interested in negotiating with the guy who controlled their water supply, made me an offer I could actually respect. Mr. Morrison, said James Chin, the lead investor. We'd like to propose a partnership. You maintain your bridge as a historic landmark. We get guaranteed water levels and everyone wins. 3 months later, the resort reopened under new management. Linda was long gone. Last I heard, she'd moved to Arizona after facing federal charges for attempted bribery and misuse of HOA funds. The new HOA board established the Morrison Bridge Historic District. My great-grandfather's bridge became the centerpiece of a community heritage trail that actually brought more tourists than Linda's exclusive vision ever could have. Property values didn't collapse like Linda predicted. They actually increased. Turns out people like living in communities with authentic history and neighbors who look out for each other. Sarah and I used our newfound local celebrity to establish the Samuel Morrison Water Rights Scholarship for engineering students. The first recipient was Maria Rodriguez, Tom's daughter, who wants to specialize in sustainable water management. Tom got promoted to resort manager and hired back all the employees Linda had laid off. The resort now donates 5% of its profits to local schools. The legal precedent we set has been cited in 12 other federal water rights cases across Texas. My bridge is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Every morning I walk across those limestone blocks my great-grandfather laid with his own hands, and I can almost hear him chuckling about how his water management system saved the day. The resort thrives. The community is stronger than ever. And our little lake has become a model for how development and history can coexist when people choose cooperation over domination. Sarah and I are expecting our first child next spring. They'll grow up running across that old stone bridge, learning to fish from the same dock where I learned from my grandfather. Some legacies are worth fighting for even when the fight seems impossible. If you're dealing with your own HOA nightmare, remember this: knowledge is power. History matters. And sometimes the best weapon against bureaucratic bullying is understanding the law better than the bullies do. Drop a comment with your own HOA horror story. Subscribe for more stories about standing up to petty tyrants who think power means they can erase history.